I kind of wanted to make a video expanding on Badempanada's video, how Clout human centipedes work, since there were many points that I resonated with, and I thought that I could expand on, right? But I guess to introduce you to the topic, Badempanada kind of made an analogy between how Clout networks tend to work in the Breadtube debatosphere, and how that sort of translates into this analogy of a Clout human centipede. But I guess to explain the analogy as simply as possible, it explains how Clout networks work on Breadtube, and there's sort of this hierarchy between the head and the tail, right? With the head reaping most of the benefits and the tail not really getting much of anything, and there's sort of the spectrum in between these two ends. But yeah, I don't really see the point in reinventing the wheel, so I'll only show you a clip of him explaining it.
And then we have the Vorsh human centipede. And Vorsh shits his clout into the mouths of centrist people who pretend to be left-wing. And in return, each of these human centipede leaders gets allegiance from the people behind them. So the people behind them basically always try to make sure to stick to whatever is acceptable to the people ahead of them. And if they ever dare to criticize someone at the head, they always do it in very soft terms, right? They have to pretend that these people are serious intellectuals.
He kind of explains the positive incentives for people to suck up to the person in front of them in the human centipede, right? But I would argue that there's also the negative incentives for people to suck up to the person in front of them as well, right? To sort of expand on this first point, you really have to think about the power dynamics between the people in front or behind in this Clout human centipede, right? Obviously, the person further up the chain, I guess meaning closer to Vosh, would have more clout in these little cliques. And with this reach, they're able to warp public perception by what topics are shown to the public and what's left out, and how these arguments are framed. And I think Empanada also mentioned the further away you are from the head, the more meager your income will be, right? And I think that plays a role in how much you can reinvest back into a streaming account or a channel, and also plays a role in how much time you can commit to streaming, for example. These two things can be weaponized against people that may not have these same privileges in this Clout centipede. I already said that people closer to the head of the centipede tend to make more, right? And I would argue this would make them appear more credible because they can reinvest that money back into editing, right? Think about PragerU, right? They model themselves as being serious intellectuals without any of the substance. They call themselves a university, their production value is relatively high, and they dress professionally, yet I don't really see any videos that are data driven in any way, right? You don't really have to go very far to see that. Yet people take them seriously because people see professional looking videos as credible. They're only able to do that because they have the budget to make that sustainable, right? They're able to spit out a video a day, maybe more, and still maintain that production value due to their ability to hire editors and basically hire an entire team to make their videos. And Kutzkazat arguably has a similar situation going for them, right? They can be consistent with their uploads while at the same time having high production value. So that's another situation where they can still be seen as credible regardless of the content of their videos. But again, we're talking about streamers here, so there isn't exactly this huge gap in production value when you're comparing two people at both ends of the human centipede. But even if the production value between two streamers are the exact same, if you're not doing this full time and you're McWaging half of the time, you're gonna be handicapped, right? You're not going to be able to upload consistently, and if you upset the centipede, you're going to have a tenth of the time to make or even think of a response to a video or tweet or narrative that the head of the centipede makes on you, right? If that even matters at all. And sort of the second point I'm going to make here is that where you are on the human centipede also sort of translates into the audience that you can reach, right? Let's say if someone has the authority to speak on a topic and is very persuasive. If they don't have much reach, even if 100% of the people that watch their content agree with them, it's not going to be nearly as effective as a person with neither of those two things doing the same thing if they have a much larger reach. For example, if Ben Shapiro says something stupid, even if less than 1% of his audience agrees with him, that's gonna warp public opinion a lot more than someone with very convincing arguments and all the accolades in the world trying to convince people at a conference with maybe 1,000 people in it. What I'm trying to say here is that facts don't seem to matter as much as the platforms that people may own. So I guess to sum the 2 points I made earlier, if the person in front of you in the Clout centipede is seen as more credible, has more reach, and so on and so forth. Like, it really isn't a surprise that people on the tail end of the centipede bow down to people in front of them, right? Because they already have an incentive to follow the herd so they can harvest that little bit of clout. But they don't want to fight someone that can warp the perception of their own audience to the point where like they get deplatformed, basically. Like, a good example might be the Professor Flowers situation, where public perception was warped just because the vast majority of people, including me, only watched the Vosh videos, right? And I only watched her videos critically long after the drama ended. The first video kind of informed how I should frame the situation, and it took a while for me to revisit the situation again. And this could also be the case with a 2-follower trans account that deplatforms itself just because J.K. Rowling doesn't like it. Like, I really don't think people voluntarily deplatform themselves just because of a few comments, right? There has to be something else sort of compelling them to do that, if that makes sense. Sort of to answer the question of why it's so dangerous to criticize anyone in front of you in the human clout centipede. If people in the clout network see you criticizing someone more influential, I would argue that they would pick the side that they think will win. Like, that's how we get to wacky conclusions that people would normally never even consider, right? For example, I literally had people do something similar to calling me like a sexist for talking about the wage gap between gender, for example, right? Like, it just gets ridiculous at a certain point. Like, you get to a point where people see a full video I make and know what I'm clearly arguing, you know, compromising on their initial position and switching back based on what's socially convenient on the time. What I'm saying is, even with situations that are clearly cut and dry, with receipts and everything, social capital will warp public opinion. Same thing with the Professor Flowers situation. Same thing with that 2-follower trans account that gets bullied by J.K. Rowling. And I guess the second point I wanted to make was sort of one about a drama industrial complex. I would define a drama industrial complex as solution selling. It's like if a ladder company weren't able to sell enough ladders to sustain their business model, so they threw people in ditches, right, so they can sell them more ladders. Or if a game company made their game artificially grindy so that they can sell you time savers as a solution. It's solution selling. You create artificial demand for your services where there isn't any. And I don't see the drama industrial complex as any different. Drama is turned into a spectacle to drive engagement, right? I'll play a bit of the clip to give you some context.
And that's basically what this is, like a cottage industry that's being fed by a human centipede. And the head of the centipede is Vosh. It's basically a bunch of people who define themselves off what people who have more followers and a bigger audience than them do, and just try to reaffirm the opinions, or at very best mildly criticize, very mildly, so as to stay in their good graces, the people whose fecal matter they rely on to have an audience themselves. So it's the clout human centipede.
I think he mentioned that the human centipede is kind of like a cottage industry, right? And I would say a lot of this revolves around drama, because that's all I seem to see with streaming. Like, if the guy at the head of the centipede's career relies entirely on drama, then everyone in the centipede is going to want endless drama, right? Because it's profitable. And I would say these clout networks are conducive to drama because drama farms are a thing, right? And if you don't know what a drama farm is, it's usually a person or an event that everyone makes a video on, right? Because it gets a lot of traffic and everyone wants to cash in on that traffic. Like, you have these swarms of opportunists that want to make videos on these things because it gets them revenue, it gets them views, it gets them clout and whatnot, right? But if the drama farm actually is a person with a platform, then they can retaliate for the reasons I mentioned earlier. But with these clout networks where you have a legions of everyone in it, you're probably going to be able to win more of these drama wars because you have this cloud of sycophants that are going to expand your reach for you because they're reiterating everything you say. And I guess to end things off, I would say things like drama industrial complexes only exist because we are on platforms like YouTube or Twitter, and those platforms have a vested interest in drama happening because it drives engagement, it makes money for the companies that own these platforms. I'm just frustrated by the fact that power plays a role in a community like Breadtube, right? Where hierarchies are supposed to be minimized. And I guess that's all I have to say about the video. Rant's over. Goodbye.